The hearing room crackled with tension long before the cameras rolled. Reporters leaned forward, pens frozen midair, as Senator Kennedy adjusted his microphone, his drawl carrying a sharp edge. "Madam, I suggest you learn some manners before you lecture me on the Constitution." Gasps rippled through the room, some amused, others stunned. Across the table, Representative Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Her silence was louder than his insult. A camera light blinked red. Within seconds, that single clip would flood every feed, every timeline, every living room in America. But no one could have predicted what would happen next, not even Senator Kennedy himself. When the filing hit the courthouse, Washington's pulse stopped for a moment. Senator John Kennedy, a man known for his wit and sharp tongue, had just sued Representative Jasmine Crockett for $80 million. The accusation was bold, almost absurd, that her televised remarks had destroyed his reputation. In the marble halls of Congress, it wasn't just gossip, it was a tremor. The lawsuit felt like more than paperwork. It was an act of dominance, a powerful man's attempt to reclaim control after a public embarrassment that millions had already witnessed. Commentators called it a legal grenade tossed into the heart of democracy. Journalists called it historic. And for many watching, it felt like the old guard striking back against a new generation unwilling to bow. Kennedy's team painted him as a victim of reckless slander. But to his critics, the move reeked of insecurity, an empire lashing out at the audacity of truth. Jasmine's moment of defiance in that hearing room had gone viral, and for days she had become a symbol of composure in the face of condescension. Kennedy's pride couldn't let that stand. Across social media, one phrase kept echoing: he didn't sue her for lying. He sued her for speaking. It wasn't just about two lawmakers, it was about power policing identity, about fear masquerading as formality. In that instant, the lawsuit became a symbol, a warning to anyone who dared to speak truth to power. But to understand why Kennedy went this far, we need to see who he really is behind the Southern charm. For years, Senator John Kennedy built his brand on charm, the kind that slipped easily into late-night soundbites and Sunday talk shows. He played the role of the Southern gentleman with a wink, his voice honeyed with humor, his words laced with bite. "I'm just a simple country lawyer," he liked to say before slicing through opponents with polished precision. But beneath the folksy one-liners lay something sharper, a pattern of condescension wrapped in civility. To his admirers, Kennedy was clever, quotable, and fearless. To his critics, he was something else entirely, a man who used wit like a weapon, whose jokes often landed hardest on women, minorities, and those who challenged his authority. His barbs weren't random, they were aimed with the accuracy of privilege. Clips surfaced of him interrupting female colleagues mid-sentence, dismissing questions from journalists of color with patronizing grins. Each exchange left a faint stain of cruelty disguised as charm. He called it Southern wit. But behind the jokes, some saw cruelty, a quiet confidence that power would always protect him, and that's when Jasmine Crockett entered the picture, unshaken, unafraid, and ready. Jasmine Crockett's story didn't begin in the marble corridors of Washington but in the crowded courtrooms of Texas, where justice often depended on who could afford it. As a young public defender, she fought for those the system forgot: the underpaid, the overcharged, the unheard. She learned early that the truth doesn't always have power unless someone is brave enough to speak it out loud. Every case she took was a battle against something bigger: poverty, prejudice, indifference. When she stepped into politics, she brought that same grit with her. No polished pedigree, no wealthy donors, just a relentless belief that the people she served deserved a voice that wouldn't tremble. She spoke in plain truths, armed with data and conviction, and never apologized for the sharpness of her words. In hearings, she became known for her calm precision, for dismantling arrogance with evidence, and for never mistaking loudness for strength. Her rise wasn't smooth. Every insult hurled her way, every attempt to diminish her only strengthened her resolve. She didn't just earn her seat, she fought for every inch of it. To her supporters, Jasmine symbolized a new kind of leadership, one unafraid to call out hypocrisy in real time. To her detractors, she was too direct, too bold, too much. But Jasmine wore those labels like armor. Because she knew, deep down, that truth always sounds aggressive to those hiding from it, and so, when power came for her, she stood ready not with fear, but with fire, but nothing could have prepared her for the lawsuit that was about to change everything. The hearing began like any other, formal greetings, polite nods, and the illusion of civility. But beneath the fluorescent lights, tension simmered. Senator Kennedy leaned forward, voice dripping with that practiced drawl. "Representative, maybe you'd understand the Constitution a little better if you'd spent less time chasing cameras and more time reading it." Laughter flickered from his side of the room. Jasmine didn't blink. Her reply was steady, razor sharp. "With all due respect, Senator, I don't need your permission to know my rights or to use them." The air tightened. Cameras zoomed in. Every pause, every glare became theater. What had begun as debate turned personal, raw, unfiltered. Kennedy's smirk faltered, his words stumbling into condescension. Jasmine's calm didn't waver. She spoke not just to him, but to everyone watching, the millions who had seen this dynamic play out their whole lives. Within hours, the clip spread across social media like wildfire. Hashtags trended, opinion panels dissected every syllable, and Kennedy's office went silent. Then, days later, came the shock: an $80 million lawsuit accusing Jasmine of defamation and intentional harm. The spectacle grew. Press conferences, pundit panels, endless spin. Kennedy painted himself as the aggrieved gentleman defending his honor. Jasmine stood by her words, refusing to back down. The courtroom became the new battleground, her voice, the threat he couldn't silence. What started as words became war, but what Jasmine said next in one breathtaking moment flipped the entire script. The studio lights glowed soft gold as Jasmine Crockett faced the camera, her expression composed, her voice steady. There was no anger, no theatrics, only precision. "Senator Kennedy says my words destroyed his reputation," she began. "But if a reputation can be destroyed by the truth, maybe it wasn't built on much to begin with." The host froze, unsure whether to interrupt. Jasmine continued, pulling a sheet of paper from the stack before her. "Let's review his own record, in his own words, point one by one." She read excerpts from Kennedy's past remarks, each line a mirror reflecting the double standards and quiet cruelty that had long gone unchecked. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The silence in the studio spoke louder than applause. Within minutes, clips flooded social media. Hashtag Crockett clapback blazed across Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. Celebrities quoted her. Students replayed her lines like an anthem. It wasn't the sting of revenge, it was the serenity of truth laid bare. Commentators called it surgical, historic, a takedown wrapped in dignity. Even her critics struggled to find footing. Outrage melted into awkward quiet. She had turned the lawsuit into a national lesson on power, race, and respect. It wasn't just a reply, it was a masterclass in grace under fire. And as her words echoed through every newsroom, the shockwaves began. The morning after Jasmine's interview, America woke up buzzing. Her words were everywhere, on breakfast table TVs, car radios, and glowing phone screens. Hashtags that once mocked her name now sang it. Celebrities tweeted lines from her speech like scripture. Civil rights leaders called her the voice of composure in an age of chaos. Even some conservative commentators, in hesitant tones, admitted she outplayed him. Cable panels replayed the clip on loop, their analysts divided between admiration and disbelief. Memes flooded social feeds, Kennedy's smirk frozen beside Jasmine's calm gaze, captioned, "The look before a legacy collapses." Donations poured into Jasmine's campaign site. Interview requests came from networks that once ignored her. Inside Kennedy's circle, panic brewed. A leaked internal memo revealed aides warning of severe reputational damage. Donors whispered about distance, consultants resigned quietly, and the lawsuit began to look less like strength and more like desperation. The tide had turned. What started as an attempt to humiliate had become an unintended coronation. The accuser stood embarrassed, the accused stood empowered, and the country hungry for authenticity had chosen its hero. In trying to silence her, he amplified her voice, but beneath the viral noise, something deeper was happening, a shift in America's political soul. Weeks later, the court dismissed the lawsuit quietly, almost anticlimactically. No fiery speeches, no victory parade. Just a few lines in a legal document that closed the case and opened a larger truth. The senator's accusations had crumbled under scrutiny, his claims of defamation exposed as little more than bruised pride dressed in formality. In the stillness that followed, commentators began to see it for what it was. What began as a weapon had become a mirror, reflecting the frailty of ego and the strength of composure. Kennedy's brand of arrogance, once masked as cleverness, now looked small against Jasmine's poise. Her restraint became her revolution. She had shown that dignity isn't weakness, and silence, when chosen, can roar louder than outrage. Across America, something subtle shifted. Viewers who had grown numb to shouting matches and scandals saw, for a moment, what integrity looked like again. Jasmine hadn't just won the argument, she had restored something the country was losing: respect. Power without humility, she proved, collapses under its own weight. And true strength isn't loud, it's steady, it's principled, it's unbreakable. And as the noise faded, one lesson remained crystal clear: Senator Kennedy's $80 million gamble was meant to silence one woman. Instead, it became a moment that echoed across a nation hungry for honesty. Jasmine Crockett's calm defiance wasn't just a clapback, it was a reminder that courage doesn't shout, it stands. From courtrooms to classrooms, people replayed her words, not for spectacle, but for strength, because every one of us has faced arrogance. Every one of us has been told to stay quiet. And every one of us knows what it feels like to want to speak truth even when power tries to crush it. If truth still matters, let the world know it. If you believe dignity will always outshine arrogance, share this story. Subscribe, stay aware, and never stop speaking truth.